Have you ever wondered whether your religious beliefs are true, or if they are simply what you were taught to believe? Most people do not actually choose their religion. They are simply born into an environment where certain beliefs already exist, and they absorb them as a natural part of life. They grow up with stories told over and over again, with things considered absolute truth, and they rarely ever stop to ask where those beliefs originally came from. Take a moment to pause. Imagine that the entire spiritual system you hold onto, from its teachings to what you call sacred, was actually created by people just as limited as you. They carried fears, desires, longings for meaning, and at times confusion. They tried to express something beyond human understanding using their own language and imagination. So, what happens if that starting point was not completely accurate? What if what you consider the ultimate truth is, in fact, just a collection of interpretations passed down through thousands of years, altered by time, power, and the circumstances of each generation? This is not meant to insult anyone's faith. It is an invitation for reflection. If you have never personally questioned what you believe, do you truly believe it? Or are you simply holding on to a system that feels safe because it is so familiar? And that leads us to the most important question of all. If your beliefs come from others, then what are the beliefs that truly belong to you? How religious beliefs are formed. When people talk about religion, they often think they are approaching an unchanging truth. But if you look more closely, you will see that religion did not fall from the sky. It was born in villages, on mountaintops, and in the gatherings of small communities. It was written in the language of its time, shaped by the psychology of the people who lived then, and molded by their fears as well as their hopes. Imagine a profound spiritual experience, a moment when someone feels something greater than themselves. That experience is real, vivid, and deeply moving, yet it lies beyond words. When that person tries to describe it, they have no choice but to borrow familiar images from their own culture. They name it after the God their people worship. They express it through symbols their community can understand. And in that moment, the infinite becomes confined within a small frame. Then others begin to tell the story. Each time it is retold, something is added, something is left out, or it is reinterpreted in a way that fits the listeners. Later, another generation writes it down. A group decides which texts to keep and which to discard. Over time, what was once a pure spiritual experience gradually turns into an organized, standardized, and even controlled system. Looking back, you will see that religious belief is not formed solely by divine experience, but also by the limits of language, the power of the era, cultural customs, and the intentions of those who retell the story. That is why two different cultures can speak of the same spiritual state and yet create two completely different religions. This does not mean that religion is wrong. It simply shows that religion is a lens, not the light itself. We never see the sacred directly. We only see it through the glass shaped by history and culture. And it is important that you recognize this truth. Because when you understand that belief is the result of countless layers of influence, you begin to see a deeper dimension, something vast and boundless, beyond the framework you were taught as a child. The greatest mistake, believing that only you hold the truth. One of the strangest things about human beings is that everyone believes they are standing on the side of truth. Every religion claims to be the only correct path, and that belief is held so tightly that it becomes almost unshakable. But if everyone insists they are right, how can we know who truly holds the truth? And what makes people so certain in the first place? The answer lies deep within the human mind. People do not seek truth alone, they also seek safety. A clear belief system, with rules, teachings, and answers to life's biggest questions about existence, death, and the meaning of life, creates a sense of stability that the mind deeply craves. When a belief brings comfort and security, it is immediately protected like a fortress. Anyone who challenges that fortress is seen as a threat, not because they are wrong, but because they shake the feeling of safety within. When you believe that your religion is the most correct one, you are not just defending its doctrines. You are defending yourself. You are protecting the image of the world that you rely on to live, to think, and to define who you are. That is why, when encountering another belief, The mind usually does not want to examine it. It only wants to reject it. Not for intellectual reasons, but for emotional ones. The mind fears that if it accepts differences, the entire structure of belief might collapse. But here lies a great paradox. Every religion holds beautiful values, profound experiences, and timeless truths. Yet, it is the insistence on being the only holder of truth that makes people overlook the shared essence of all spiritual traditions. When everyone believes they possess the one and only answer, no one can truly learn from one another. And the saddest part is that this certainty does not bring people closer to the truth. It only creates division, conflict, and a false sense of superiority. People forget that all beliefs originate from the experiences of other human beings, people who, like them, could never escape the limits of their time and their language. So the greatest mistake does not belong to any particular religion. The greatest mistake lies in believing that there is only one version of truth, and that it just happens to be the one you were taught as a child. When you hold absolute certainty, you close the door to discovery. When you think you already know, you lose the ability to see something new. And in that very moment, you move farther away from the truth than ever before. Religion is the map, not the territory. One of humanity's greatest misunderstandings is confusing the map with the territory. People look at a symbol and believe it is reality itself. They read a sacred verse and think they have grasped the essence of the universe. Yet no one would ever mistake a map for the land itself except when it comes to the realm of the spirit. Imagine holding a map of a mountain. The map shows contours, symbols, and notes describing elevation and terrain. It is useful, yes, but through it, you cannot feel the chill of the wind, the scent of the soil, the sounds of the forest, or the sensation of standing on the summit. The map is only a description, a guide, a structure to help you find your way. The real mountain is always greater, more alive, and beyond anything a drawing can capture. Religion works the same way. Every teaching is just a map created by humans to describe what is sacred. It is an attempt to express the inexpressible through the limited tool of language. But over time, people began to worship the map instead of the territory. They argue about the map's colors, its lines, its symbols, and the correct way to draw it, while forgetting the very thing the map was meant to point toward. The problem is not the map itself. Maps are necessary. They help us navigate our spiritual journey. The trouble begins when the map is treated as absolute truth. At that point, anyone who draws a different map is seen as wrong. Everyone holds up their own map and declares that this is the true shape of the mountain, without realizing that the mountain could never be confined within human-made lines. The interesting thing is, no matter how different the maps are, they all point to the same place. Yet by clinging too tightly to their own map, people forget the original purpose to explore the territory. They stay where they are, holding up their maps, pointing, debating, and convincing themselves they understand the mountain, even though they have never taken a single step upon it. When you realize that religion is only a map, you stop clinging to details of right and wrong. You stop feeling afraid when someone else's map looks different from yours. You stop being confused when two religions describe the same experience in two different languages. You understand that such differences are natural, because no one can describe an infinite territory using finite words. And when you see this clearly, you begin to do what humanity has long forgotten. You fold the map, lift your gaze toward the horizon, and start walking. You begin to explore. And that, at last, is the true spiritual journey. Why people misunderstand spiritual experience. There is something most people never realize. The greatest things in the spiritual world never begin with words, doctrines, or scriptures. They always begin with a real, vivid, indescribable experience. What many call revelation is, in truth, simply a moment when someone touches a deeper layer of consciousness than usual. But from that moment to the time it becomes religion, everything changes. Imagine a person suddenly discovering an absolute stillness within, a moment of clarity in which all worries disappear, all boundaries dissolve, and there remains only a strange yet beautiful sense of belonging to something far greater than oneself. That experience astonishes them. It makes them realize there is something far deeper than ordinary life. Yet the moment they try to describe it, the truth begins to distort. They must use familiar language, images inherited from their culture, and the religious stories they heard as children. Someone raised in Jewish tradition will describe it through the lens of Judaism. Someone in India will use different words. A person from a meditative tradition will express it in yet another way. It is the same experience, but three entirely different expressions. Then those who hear the story have not lived that moment themselves. They only hear the tale. And soon, they begin to believe in the story instead of seeking the real experience. What was once alive becomes doctrine. A state of awakening becomes a sermon. A moment of enlightenment turns into a lesson to memorize. And a vast, living experience hardens into a rigid form. That is the great misunderstanding. People mistake the sacred for the way it is expressed by humans. They believe in the words, forgetting that words are only the boat carrying the experience, not the experience itself. If you understand this, you will no longer think that religion is merely about believing. You will see that the most important thing has never been in the scriptures, but in your own ability to touch stillness, clarity, and depth within yourself. The sacred is not someone else's story. It is something you must feel for yourself. What if everything is wrong? When it comes to religion, what most people fear the most is the possibility of being wrong. Wrong about God. Wrong about the teachings. Wrong about what they have believed since childhood. Wrong about the moral foundation they have built their lives upon. Even the thought of that can make them anxious or defensive. But here is something interesting. Being wrong does not mean being meaningless. Being wrong simply means being incomplete. It means you are seeing one part of the picture and mistaking it for the whole. Imagine looking at the universe through a window. The scene outside is still real, but your view is limited by the size of the frame. Someone standing outside in the open field can see the entire sky, but that does not mean what you see is false. It is just smaller than reality. Religion works the same way. Each religion is a window that looks toward the sacred. One window can never hold the entire sky. One tradition can never contain infinite truth. So if what you believe is not completely correct, that does not make it worthless. It only means there is something larger, something waiting for you to discover. And here is another important thing. Human beings are not really afraid of truth. They are afraid of losing their sense of certainty, afraid of losing the framework they depend on. Yet sometimes, the very moment you dare to question your own beliefs becomes the doorway to a kind of spiritual maturity you have never known before. If everything you have believed so far is only part of the truth, then where is the rest? It is in the questions you have avoided. It is in curiosity. It is in your willingness to look beyond the limits of what you were taught. And perhaps it is within you, not inside any fixed doctrine. Truth never fears being questioned. Only weak beliefs are afraid of being shaken. When you understand this, you no longer fear being wrong. You begin to feel curious. You begin to open up. And that openness, that willingness to see beyond yourself, is the path that truly brings you closer to what is sacred. The forgotten truth, direct experience. When you look back at history, you will notice something very clear. The founders of the great spiritual traditions did not find truth in books or debates. They found it in silence, in long nights spent alone, in moments when they had to face themselves with nothing left to hold on to. The first spiritual experiences of humankind were always direct experiences. There were no churches, no rituals, no scriptures, only a human being and an awakening that came like a flash of light breaking through the darkness. That is where it all began. But over time, this essential core began to fade away. People started treating religion as a system of knowledge. They tried to understand it with the mind instead of experiencing it through life itself. They memorized the teachings of others, but never looked into the place those teachings were meant to point toward. Look around you. Many people read dozens of books about meditation, but have never sat still for 5 minutes. Many talk about enlightenment while spending their entire lives caught in anxiety and mental noise. Many argue about God with tension and defensiveness, yet have never felt a single moment of true stillness in their own hearts. It is like standing in front of a glass of water, describing it, analyzing it, even debating what water really is without ever taking a sip. The modern world encourages that. We live in the age of information. But information can never replace experience. And this is the crucial point to see. The sacred can never be found in argument, nor in definitions, nor in lofty concepts passed down through the centuries. The sacred appears only when you truly live with it, when you are quiet enough to feel what is happening right now, in this very moment. Many people search for God but never listen to themselves. Many travel the world seeking truth, yet avoid the silence where truth can be most clearly seen. The truth lies in direct experience, not in stories retold by others. Here is a revised way to make this even clearer. Today, many people approach religion by reading a lot, listening a lot, and debating endlessly. But the sacred cannot be understood as knowledge. It is not something to analyze, it is something to be felt directly through your own stillness and awareness. You cannot understand water through description. You understand it only when you take a sip. You cannot understand love through definitions. You understand it only when you experience it. And you cannot understand the sacred by memorizing doctrine. You understand it only when your mind truly touches that clear and quiet state within. The deepest truths can never be learned through words. They can only be lived through awareness, right here, in this present moment. The truth hidden beneath all religions. When people argue about religion, they often focus on differences. One person believes in a single God, another believes in many. Someone else believes in no God at all, but in awakening. On the surface, these systems appear to be completely different paths, and sometimes they seem so different that people assume they are opposites. But if you set all forms aside, if you stop looking at rituals and words, and instead look at what each religion is actually trying to express, you will discover something fascinating. Beneath all the differences lies a shared essence that few are willing to acknowledge. Every spiritual tradition, in its own way, is pointing toward one thing: the deeper nature of life and of human existence itself. Look closely. In one religion, they speak of unconditional love. In another, they speak of compassion. In yet another, they describe it as the oneness of all that exists. And elsewhere, they call it awakening beyond the self. The words differ, yet the spirit behind them is strikingly similar. No religion, at its core, encourages hatred. No tradition rejects clarity or awareness. No spiritual path glorifies ego, selfishness, or fear. All of them guide people toward openness, growth, understanding, and a kind of peace that goes beyond ordinary desires. So why do people fail to see this common ground? Because they are trapped in form, because they compare rituals instead of depth, because they cling to symbols instead of seeing what those symbols point to. Every religion has a finger pointing toward the sky, yet people stand there arguing about the shape of the finger and forget the sky itself. When you look beyond the names, you will see that all great traditions are describing the same flow of consciousness, the same state of mind, the same truth that humanity has sought to understand since the beginning of time. Each culture simply dresses it in a different garment. And when you recognize this, you no longer feel the need to defend your religion by opposing others. You begin to listen. You begin to understand. You begin to see that the sacred does not belong to any single system. It belongs to life itself, and life is far too vast to be confined by the labels we create. If every belief can be wrong, then where does truth lie? When you reach the end of your search for religion, there comes a moment that feels both confusing and liberating. It is the moment you realize that everything you have believed up to now might only be a small part of the whole picture. And if everything could be wrong, that opens up a deeper question. Where does truth truly lie? The answer does not come from deciding which religion is correct. Because the more you try to find an absolute answer, the more you will see that the spiritual world does not work like mathematics. Truth is not a formula. To memorize it is a door that each person must open on their own. You can read hundreds of books. You can listen to talks from those considered enlightened. You can memorize the doctrines of any religion. But all of that will only bring you to the last step of knowledge. From that step, you still have to walk into the experience yourself. The strange thing is that people fear this emptiness, the need to discover for themselves. They fear that without fixed words to hold on to, they will lose their way. But it is that very fear that keeps them standing outside the door for their entire lives. Truth does not hide from anyone. It does not demand that you be special or scholarly. It only asks that you be honest with yourself, honest when you do not know, honest when you doubt, honest when you see that the absolute certainty you once clung to was only a sense of safety, not truth. When you dare to step into the space without guarantees, where no ready-made answers exist, you begin to see what you have never seen before. You begin to hear the deeper layers within you that the noise of the world once drowned out. You begin to realize that life is not separate from you, and you are not separate from life. Truth is not in the book is only the lamp. Truth is not in the ritual is only the path. Truth is not in the belief system, the belief is only the boat to cross the river. Each of these things has value, but none of them is the destination. The destination is the moment you awaken. It is the place where you see the world with eyes no longer clouded by judgment. It is the realization that the sacred has never been far away, it has been within you all along. And here lies the most important point. When you let go of what you believe, you do not lose the truth. You only remove the dust that was covering it. You do not lose God, you simply let go of the ideas about God that others placed upon you. Truth is not something you find through belief. Truth appears when you are quiet enough to see what is.